Why was she the only one who didn't flinch when the explosion shook the ground? Dust rained down from the ceiling, fluorescent lights flickered, and every man at the briefing table jolted in their seats. But she sat still, calm, eyes locked on the map spread before her like the noise outside hadn't even existed. Some called it nerves of steel, others thought it was detachment, but the truth was quieter than either. She had learned long ago that fear had no sound, no face, no obvious warning. Fear lived in silence, and in silence she had built her entire life. Her name wasn't spoken much in the unit, not because they didn't know it, but because she carried herself differently. Too reserved, too deliberate. The others laughed, traded stories, shared the kind of banter soldiers used to stitch together fragile courage. She stayed on the edges of their conversations, a silent figure with eyes that seemed to measure the weight of every word. Tonight, her silence was louder than ever. The mission briefing dragged on. The major spoke with heavy authority, pointing at coordinates glowing under the projector. Hostile territory, enemy fortification, too much unknown. Their squad wasn't chosen because they were expendable. They were chosen because there was no one else to send. And yet her presence at that table wasn't supposed to happen. Not originally. She was never intended to be on this mission. She wasn't even part of their unit until weeks ago. But one casualty in the last operation had left a space, one they reluctantly filled with her. Reluctantly. That word hung in the air whenever she walked into a room. So when she raised her eyes at the map and asked the question no one else dared, what's the fallback if extraction fails? The room went quiet. The major glanced at her. He didn't like interruptions. There won't be failure, not if we do our jobs. But her gaze didn't drop. She held him there, calm and steady, forcing a silence so heavy that even the bravest avoided eye contact. Until finally, the major looked away, cleared his throat, and moved on. She didn't push further. She didn't need to. They had already heard her. When the meeting ended, boots scuffed, chairs scraped back, men muttered under their breath. She walked out alone, her pace slow, deliberate. None of them knew the weight she carried beneath that silence. None of them could guess why she needed a fallback plan more than anyone. Because unlike them, she had no one waiting for her return. No family to send letters to, no picture tucked inside her vest. Her anchor wasn't love, it was memory. A memory she didn't speak about. Not yet. The convoy rolled out under a cold moon. Engines low, headlights dimmed, radios clipped to silence. Every mile carried them deeper into a valley where echoes traveled faster than bullets. The men shifted restlessly in their seats, rifles clutched too tightly. She sat at the end, eyes fixed on the window. She wasn't searching for enemies. She was searching for patterns. Shadows that lingered too long, glints of metal where there shouldn't be any. The landscape spoke, and she had trained herself to listen. But even as she scanned the night, her mind drifted inward. To the small farmhouse where she grew up. To the father who taught her that patience wasn't just a virtue, it was survival. To the memory of her younger brother who had left for the military before her and never returned. They told her it was an ambush, wrong place, wrong time, but the official words had always felt incomplete. They spoke of statistics. She remembered a person. His death was what sent her here. It was the silence afterward. The silence of watching her mother fold into herself, day by day, until grief turned her into a shadow. The silence of unanswered questions that hung heavier with each passing year. Her brother had once told her, if you ever hold a rifle, don't do it to fight. Do it to see further than others can. She never understood what he meant then. Now she lived by it. The convoy braked suddenly. Dusk clouded the road. Every soldier tensed, hands snapping to triggers. She leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing at the tree line ahead. Nothing moved, nothing visible, yet something was there. She could feel it, the way the air seemed to hold its breath. The lieutenant ordered two men to check the path. They hesitated, then stepped out, boots crunching gravel like thunder. The silence stretched. One of them cursed under his breath, trying to mask his nerves. The other raised a hand, clear. Engines roared again. They moved forward, but she didn't relax. The silence hadn't broken, it had only shifted. Hours later, when they reached the forward outpost, exhaustion clung to everyone. Some fell into makeshift bunks. Others stripped weapons down, cleaning them with mechanical precision to hide shaking hands. She took her rifle and walked out to the edge of the perimeter, alone again. The night was cold, biting at exposed skin. She lay prone in the dirt, her cheek pressed against steel, eye fixed on the scope, not searching for targets, just watching. The stars above felt like distant eyes, witnessing everything in silence. And that's when the thought returned, the one she buried deeper than any bullet. What if she didn't make it back? What if this mission swallowed her whole like it had so many others before her? Would anyone remember her name? Or would she vanish into the same silence her brother had? For the first time in weeks, a tremor of fear pulsed through her. Not fear of dying, fear of disappearing unnoticed. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a breath, let it go. At dawn, the operation began. They moved in small units through the valley, boots damp from dew, breath visible in the crisp morning air. Birds scattered ahead, disturbed by movement they couldn't see. The squad advanced with caution, every step rehearsed in their minds. And still she felt it, that pull in her gut, that sense of being watched. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. When the first shot cracked through the silence, it wasn't a surprise to her. She had already shifted, already spotted the faint glimmer on the ridgeline. She squeezed her trigger before anyone else even registered where the shot had come from. One pull, clean, final. The echo rolled through the valley, freezing her squad mid-step. For a second, no one moved. Then, slowly, heads turned toward her, not in doubt this time, in recognition. She didn't look back at them. Her eyes stayed on the scope, scanning, because she knew it wasn't over. That was only the first. And for the first time since the briefing, she let herself whisper, not to the squad, not to the air, but to the memory she carried. I see further now. The silence answered. Why did no one speak after her shot echoed through the valley? The squad moved again, tense, every boot pressing into the soil like it might give way beneath them. They hadn't expected her to react that fast, hadn't expected her bullet to silence the unseen threat before it could claim one of them. Yet, not a single word of thanks passed their lips. Some of them still didn't trust her. Maybe they never would. She didn't need their trust. She needed their survival. That was enough. The sun crept higher, washing the valley in pale light. Rocks glistened with dew. Every ridge looked sharper, every shadow deeper. The enemy had picked their ground well. They knew the valley better than any map could explain. For every hill the squad crossed, there was another ridge above it, another vantage waiting to be used. She kept her eyes moving, rifle raised, scope scanning, her breath slow, controlled. She wasn't thinking of the squad's formation or the orders barked out in clipped whispers. She was listening for what didn't belong, for what silence tried to hide. A raven circled high overhead. Birds always gave them away. If they flew, something had moved. She tracked its arc, saw where it veered, where it dipped lower, startled by something on the slope. There, she whispered, not loud enough to be heard, but the word was for her, not them. She adjusted, sight aligned, waited, patience stretched. Seconds felt like hours, then movement, a sliver of fabric where stone should have been. She squeezed. The squad flinched at the shot. Dust erupted from the slope. A body slid lifeless down rock. Clear, she said finally. They looked at her differently this time. Uneasy, yes, but there was something else in their eyes now, a reluctant acknowledgement. The lieutenant gave her a nod, just a flicker, barely noticeable, but she caught it, the smallest shift in trust. Still, no one asked her how she knew. No one dared. They pushed deeper into the valley. Hours passed. The sun grew hotter, sweat mixed with dust running down necks, soaking collars. The weight of gear pressed heavier with each step. The mission wasn't just to survive. It was to reach the compound at the far edge, a nest of enemy fighters supplying the entire region. Blow it, cripple their movement. But the path there was written in blood, traps, snipers, ambushes. They stopped at a dry riverbed, kneeling low, rehydrating in silence. She sat slightly apart, rifle balanced across her knees, watching the ridgeline like it might speak. One of the younger soldiers, barely more than a boy, sat nearby. His hands shook as he unscrewed his canteen. He tried to hide it, tried to pretend exhaustion was the cause, but she knew the difference. She'd seen fear before, real fear. He caught her watching and stiffened, defensive. What? Never seen someone thirsty before. His voice cracked more than he wanted. She said nothing, just gave a small nod and looked away. That silence unnerved him more than any words. A moment later, he muttered, "They said this valley eats people alive. You believe that?" Her eyes stayed on the ridgeline. "Only if you let it." He frowned, almost angry, but there was something else under it, a strange kind of relief. Like someone acknowledging his fear made it more bearable. He didn't speak again, but when they stood to move on, he stayed closer to her than before. The valley narrowed ahead, steeper cliffs, less sky. The squad slowed, every step more careful. It was the kind of place you didn't want to breathe too loudly. And then it came, the sharp, mechanical click that froze every heartbeat. The point man had stepped on it. Pressure plate, buried mine. His breath hitched, eyes wide, body locked in terror. One wrong move and he would be gone. The squad froze. No one moved. No one spoke. The lieutenant's jaw clenched, sweat dripping down his temple as he whispered for everyone to hold position. She dropped to her stomach instantly, crawling forward without hesitation. Dirt scraped her arms, rocks dug into her ribs, but she didn't slow. She moved until she was face to face with the soldier, his chest heaving like he couldn't get enough air. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "Don't breathe like that, you'll burn out." He whispered, trembling, "I can't if I move." "You won't, not until I tell you." Her eyes locked on his, steady, unblinking. "Do you trust me?" He shook his head, the truth spilled raw. She almost smiled. "Good, fear is better than blind trust. Now stay still." She shifted her rifle aside, reached slowly into her pack. Her fingers closed around a thin probe, the kind only someone like her would carry. She had learned this craft in training no one else had bothered with. Learned because she knew one day it wouldn't just save her, it would save someone like him. The squad watched in tense silence as she worked, brushing soil grain by grain, revealing the crude edges of the mine. Her movements were precise, delicate, her breath shallow and even. To them it must have looked like insanity. To her it was routine. Finally she whispered, "Lift your boot, slow." He stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Her tone sharpened, cutting through his fear. "Now." He obeyed. Millimeter by millimeter, his boot rose. The plate trembled, but she had already wedged the probe beneath it, locking the trigger. She exhaled slowly. "It's done, move." The soldier stumbled back, collapsing onto the dirt, gasping like he'd just surfaced from drowning. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then finally the lieutenant whispered, "How did you?" She cut him off with a glance. "Keep moving. The longer we stay, the worse it gets." There was something in his eyes now. Not just acknowledgement, not just trust, something heavier, respect. But she didn't carry it like a victory. She carried it like a burden. Because the more they saw of her, the more they would start to ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. As they pushed on, she felt it again, the weight of memory pressing at her ribs, the farmhouse, her brother's voice, the silence after his death, and that one unshakable truth: every life she saved here was a debt she carried for him. They reached a ridge by nightfall, setting up a perimeter, bodies exhausted, eyes hollow. Some fell asleep immediately. Others whispered in the dark, voices thin and brittle. She stayed awake, lying flat with her scope aimed at the horizon. The stars glimmered coldly above, the valley stretching endless and black. She could hear every breath in the squad, every rustle of fabric, every shift of restless dreams. And then, faint movement in the dark. She saw it before anyone. Shapes creeping along the opposite ridge, shadows too disciplined to be animals. Enemy patrol approaching their camp. Her finger rested on the trigger. She could take them out before they knew, but firing would reveal their position. It would bring more. The squad slept unaware, trusting her silence, trusting her unseen watch. Her pulse slowed. Her mind weighed every outcome. And then she did nothing. She let the patrol pass, shadows sliding silently along the ridge until they vanished into the night. She released the breath she'd been holding. The squad never knew how close they had come. She turned her eyes back to the stars, whispering to herself words no one else would ever hear. Not every battle needs a bullet. The silence answered again. Why did she hesitate to fire? Why, in that frozen moment, did the soldier who never missed a shot choose restraint instead of violence? The question lingered in her own mind long after the enemy patrol had vanished into the dark. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't mercy. It was calculation. But even then, part of her wondered, was she starting to see herself in the shadows she didn't kill? Morning came harsh and unforgiving. The squad stirred, stiff and worn, dust caked into every crease of their uniforms. The lieutenant gave quiet orders to move before the sun rose too high. The valley was cruel under daylight, offering no shade, no cover. She walked at the rear, rifle resting across her chest, scanning the terrain with a vigilance that had become second nature. The younger soldier, the one she had saved from the mine, kept glancing back at her like he wanted to speak but couldn't find words. His silence was loud. She recognized it. She had lived in that silence for years. By midday, the squad reached a plateau. From there, the compound lay faintly visible in the distance. Concrete walls half buried in rock, smoke drifting from chimneys, faint sounds of life carried by the wind. Their target. The reason they had risked everything to get here. But the closer it came into view, the heavier the silence grew among them. Every man knew what it meant to approach a place like that. Not everyone would walk away. They huddled against boulders, studying the compound through binoculars. Guards patrolled. Vehicles shifted in and out. Too many for a direct assault. Too few to suggest carelessness. The lieutenant muttered, "We'll wait for nightfall, move under cover of darkness, plant charges on the supply depot, extraction at dawn." It was a plan, clean, simple on paper, but she knew better. Darkness didn't guarantee safety. Darkness amplified fear. As the squad rested, she stayed crouched with her rifle scope fixed on the compound. Every sound magnified, the rattle of a gate, the shuffle of boots, the bark of a dog echoing in the still air. She cataloged them all. Details mattered. Patterns mattered. And then she saw it. A figure inside the compound, moving differently than the guards. Not hurried, not casual, purposeful. Someone important. She adjusted focus, her breath catching slightly. It wasn't recognition, not exactly. But something in the posture, the stride, triggered a memory. Her brother. No, it couldn't be. He was gone. She knew he was gone, but her heart jolted anyway, betraying her calm. For one fractured moment, she felt 16 again, standing on the porch of their farmhouse, watching him walk away for the last time. She pulled back from the scope, shutting her eyes hard. It wasn't him. Of course it wasn't him. But grief had a way of dressing strangers in familiar skin. Still, the tremor remained in her chest. When she opened her eyes again, one of the soldiers was watching her. The younger one, the boy with the shaken hands. "You okay?" he asked softly, like he didn't want the others to hear. She almost didn't answer, almost kept her silence intact. But something in his gaze, the raw fear, the unspoken need for connection, unlocked a crack in her armor. "Fine," she said, "a lie but a small one." He nodded, though his eyes told her he didn't believe it. Then he added, "You ever think about what happens if we don't make it?" Her throat tightened. She should have dismissed it. should have reminded him to focus on the mission, to keep his mind sharp. But she couldn't, not when the question mirrored the one that haunted her every night. "Yes," she said finally, "every time I breathe." He looked at her like he didn't expect honesty. His voice dropped lower. "What keeps you moving?" For a long time she didn't answer. Then in the softest whisper she said, "Memory." That was all, nothing more. But it was enough to quiet him, enough to stitch a fragile thread between them in the silence. Night fell heavy and cold. The squad moved, shadows merging with stone, boots muffled against dirt. Their breaths puffed white in the moonlight. The compound loomed closer with every step, its walls rising like a fortress carved from the earth. She led from the side, rifle steady, eyes sharp, every angle measured, every corner scanned. The men followed orders, but their nerves betrayed them, too quick in their movements, too heavy in their steps. She felt their fear pressing in around her, thick as the night itself. Reaching the outer wall, they crouched low. The lieutenant signaled. Two men slipped forward with charges, pressing them against the depot doors. Wires uncoiled, timers set. The air felt brittle, like one wrong sound could shatter it. And then it happened. A guard rounded the corner, too soon, too quiet. His eyes widened at the sight of intruders, his mouth opened to shout. Her rifle spoke before he could. The shot cracked, clean, final. His body crumpled soundlessly. But the silence after wasn't safety. It was alarm. Shouts erupted inside the compound. Lights flared on. Sirens wailed. "Move, move," the lieutenant hissed, shoving men toward cover. Chaos ignited. Gunfire burst from windows. Bullets shredded dirt and stone. The squad scattered, returning fire pinned by the storm of lead. The charges weren't set yet. The mission teetered on collapse. She stayed low, scanning, calculating. The guard towers lit up, searchlights sweeping. If they were caught here, none of them would leave alive. She found her mark, a tower light blinding the squad's cover. She drew a slow breath, steadied and squeezed. The bulb exploded in a rain of sparks, plunging half the yard into darkness. "Go," she shouted, not waiting for the lieutenant's order. The men surged forward, planting charges in frantic bursts, bullets ricocheting around them. One fell, screaming, blood soaking his leg. Another froze, panic locking his muscles. She grabbed him, shoved him down, pressed his trembling hands onto the detonator. Her eyes burned into his. "You finish it. Do you hear me? You finish it." He nodded, shaking, but he obeyed. When the last charge was set, the lieutenant signaled retreat. They ran, stumbling, dragging the wounded, hearts hammering like war drums. The compound roared alive behind them, enemies swarming, bullets chasing every step. And then light, a searing flash that turned night to day. The depot erupted in flame, fire clawing skyward, shockwave rattling their bones. They collapsed behind rocks, gasping, ears ringing. For a moment none spoke, just stared at the inferno consuming the enemy's supply. The mission was alive, but so were they. She lay flat, chest heaving, rifle still clutched tight. Her eyes locked on the fire, the glow painting her face in flickering light. And in that glow she whispered again, to memory, to silence, to the brother who never returned. "For you." The fire answered, crackling like a voice carried from beyond. But deep down she knew this wasn't the end. Destroying supplies wasn't victory. Survival wasn't closure. The hardest part was still ahead. Because the silence inside her was growing louder. Why did the silence after victory feel heavier than defeat? The flames devoured the compound, black smoke climbing into the night, a pillar of destruction visible for miles. The squad had done what they came to do. The supply depot was gone, the enemy crippled. And yet crouched behind rocks, breaths ragged, ears ringing, no one cheered. No one claimed triumph. The wounded soldier's groans filled the air. His leg was shredded, crimson soaking the dirt beneath him. Another man tore fabric trying to bind the wound, hands slippery with blood. The lieutenant whispered into the radio, voice sharp with urgency but static answered. No extraction. Not yet. They were stranded. She stayed slightly apart, rifle still raised, eyes fixed on the ridgeline. Because fire wasn't just destruction, it was a beacon. More would come. She could feel it in her bones. The night wasn't theirs anymore. The younger soldier, the one who had asked about memory, knelt beside the wounded man, pressing down on the bleeding. His face was pale, jaw tight, but he didn't look away. His silence had hardened into something steadier. She caught his eye briefly. A flicker of recognition passed between them. He was learning what silence really meant. The lieutenant turned, his face drawn. We move. Now, we can't hold this ground. We get to higher terrain. Extraction will find us there. The squad obeyed, hauling the wounded, gear heavier than ever. They moved into the dark, fire glowing behind them, smoke marking their trail. Every step felt stolen, borrowed against time. The valley stretched like a labyrinth. Rocks loomed, shadows twisted. The further they moved, the more silence returned, not safety, but the kind that hummed with threat. She took rear guard again, not by order but by choice. She knew danger came from behind, from what they thought they'd left behind. Every so often she glanced back, nothing visible, nothing moving. Yet her gut told her the silence was following them. Hours passed, muscles burned. The wounded man's breathing grew weaker. He clung to consciousness in fragments, muttering words none of them could understand. Stories, maybe, or memories slipping loose. At last they reached a jagged outcrop, a rise of stone that gave them sight over the valley. They collapsed there, bodies trembling, weapons laid across laps. The lieutenant checked the radio again, still static. Frustration carved lines into his face. They were alone. The younger soldier sat close to her now, not talking, not asking, just near. It was enough. He didn't understand it, but some part of him felt safer when her silence was beside him. She looked out across the valley, eyes tracing every shadow, and in the distance she saw them, tiny sparks moving slowly, enemy torches, dozens, maybe more. They were coming. She didn't tell the squad yet. Not because she wanted to keep it from them, but because truth, too early, could shatter fragile courage. Instead, she whispered only to herself. They know. The lieutenant approached, voice low. You saw something. She gave a small nod, eyes never leaving the horizon. They'll be here before dawn. His jaw tightened. He looked back at the men, worn and broken, one bleeding out, the rest shadows of themselves. Then he looked at her. For the first time, his eyes carried not suspicion, not doubt, but dependence. What do you suggest? The question struck deeper than he knew. In all her years, no superior had asked her that. Orders were always given, never requested. Her silence was useful, her precision valuable, but her voice, rarely invited. And yet here he was, trusting her judgment. She swallowed, eyes narrowing on the ridgeline. We can't outrun them, we can't outgun them, but we can outlast them. High ground, limited approach, make them come to us, hold until extraction. The lieutenant nodded, decision made. He turned to the squad, issuing orders with sharp clarity. Men stirred, dragging themselves into motion, moving stones, stacking what little cover they could, preparing for the storm. As they worked, she stayed still, scanning the valley. The torches grew closer. She could almost hear them now, the distant murmur of men, the shuffle of boots, the clink of weapons. The younger soldier came to her side again, whispering, We're not getting out, are we? Her eyes stayed forward, not all of us. He flinched at the honesty, but she didn't soften it. False hope killed faster than bullets. His silence lingered heavy. Then softly he asked, Why are you here, really? The question cut deeper than the valley wind. She almost ignored it, almost retreated into the armor of silence. But something in his voice, curiosity without judgment, unlocked her. My brother, she said quietly. He waited. She exhaled, the memory bleeding out like a wound. He came here years ago. Different mission. He didn't come back. They told us it was quick, clean, but I never believed it. Silence doesn't answer questions, so I came to find the truth." The boy stared, eyes wide, not in pity but in understanding. Finally, he whispered, "And if you don't find it?" Her gaze hardened on the approaching torches. "Then I'll become part of it." The silence stretched between them, and in that silence he seemed to grow older, like her words had carved something permanent inside him. The night deepened. The enemy drew closer. The squad finished their makeshift defenses, weapons loaded, eyes hollow with fatigue. They didn't need to be told what was coming. The silence said it all. When the first shot rang out, it wasn't hers. It was theirs, a warning, a challenge. The valley erupted. Gunfire tore the night apart. Bullets sparked against stone, dust rising like smoke. The squad held their ground, every shot desperate, every trigger pull survival. She lay prone, scope steady, breath measured. Each squeeze of her trigger was a sentence written in silence. One target, then another, then another. She didn't think of them as enemies, didn't think of them as men. She thought of them as obstacles between her squad and tomorrow. The wounded soldier screamed, clutching his leg as fresh blood spread. Another man fell, hit in the shoulder, teeth clenched against pain. The lieutenant barked orders, voice hoarse, trying to keep men steady. But the enemy didn't stop. They kept coming, shadows upon shadows, their torches dying as they drew closer, replaced by muzzle flashes. Her rifle grew hot, her shoulder ached, her eyes burned, and still she did not stop. She couldn't. Because in every figure she dropped, she saw her brother. Not his face, not his body, but his absence, the space he left behind. Hours blurred into moments. The squad was breaking, ammo running low, morale shattered. Men whispered prayers between bursts of fire. And through it all she stayed calm, silent, a stillness in the storm. When the sky began to pale with the first hint of dawn, the gunfire slowed. The enemy retreated, fading back into the valley, not defeated, only paused. The squad collapsed where they were, too weak to celebrate, too numb to process. The wounded moaned softly, bloodied bandages soaking through. The lieutenant leaned against rock, eyes hollow, radio clutched like a lifeline, still static. She lowered her rifle, hands trembling for the first time. Her body ached, her mind frayed, but her silence remained. The younger soldier sat near her, staring at the horizon. His face was streaked with dirt and blood, but his eyes carried something new. Not fear, not despair, something harder, something older. He whispered almost to himself, "We're not done, are we?" She shook her head slowly, "No, not yet." And as the sun crept higher, casting its first light over the broken valley, she felt the silence inside her deepen, not emptiness, not despair. Something else, something waiting. The battle was not over, the truth was not revealed. And she knew, with a weight heavier than her rifle, that the hardest choice was still ahead. The dawn was pale and weak, spilling light across a battlefield still trembling with the echoes of gunfire. The rocky slope was littered with brass casings, blood, and the ragged bodies of the fallen. The smoke from the burning depot still drifted faintly in the distance, as though even destruction was too exhausted to rise. She lay on her stomach, cheek pressed to cold stone, rifle still cradled against her shoulder. Her body screamed for rest, every muscle a knot of fire, but she did not close her eyes. She couldn't. She had trained herself long ago to resist the lure of sleep when the silence grew too deep, because silence in war was never permanent. It was only the pause before another scream. The younger soldier sat beside her, back against a boulder, face pale but awake. His eyes were no longer wide with boyish fear. They were narrower now, edged with something that looked too much like hers, resignation wrapped in steel. The lieutenant crouched a few yards away, hunched over the battered radio, twisting the dial with bloodied fingers. Still static, his jaw clenched tighter with every hiss of dead air. The wounded man was fatting. His leg was mangled beyond repair, bandages soaked crimson, his breath shallow and ragged. One of the squad whispered prayers beside him, the words trembling into the thin mountain air. It felt less like a squad now and more like fragments, pieces of men scattered across stone, holding together only because falling apart was worse. And then the silence broke. Not with gunfire, not with shouting. With footsteps. Soft at first, then louder, dozens, maybe more, boots crunching against rock, steady and unhurried. The enemy was advancing again. She lifted her rifle. Her scope swept the ridgeline. Figures emerged from the haze of dawn, dark shapes against pale light, moving with grim certainty. They carried no torches now. They didn't need them. The sun revealed their intent. The lieutenant swore under his breath. They didn't retreat, they regrouped. Her finger brushed the trigger. Her breathing slowed. She could end the first man now, the one leading, his rifle low but ready. But she hesitated. Not because she doubted, but because she recognized him. Not his face. She had never seen him before, but his stance, his walk, the way he carried the weight of command on his shoulders. She had seen that before on her brother. Her stomach twisted, a ghost in the flesh of a stranger. The younger soldier whispered urgently, "Why aren't you shooting?" Her silence was answer enough. Gunfire erupted again, snapping her out of hesitation. The squad fired wildly, bullets sparking against rock, the air thick with the roar of combat. She joined, her rifle barking with precision, but the unease in her chest did not fade. The enemy surged forward. Grenades burst, showering dirt and stone. The wounded man screamed once more, then fell still. His prayer companion shook him desperately, then froze when the truth settled in. Another silence claimed him. The lieutenant shouted over the chaos, voice breaking, "Fall back, higher ground." But there was nowhere higher. They were already at the edge, the mountain dropping away into a deadly ravine. Trapped. Her hands tightened on the rifle. Options spun through her mind, cold and merciless. Fight to the last bullet, surrender and pray for mercy, or... She shoved the thought away. Not yet, not while breath still moved in their chests. The younger soldier fired until his rifle clicked empty. He fumbled for a new magazine, hands shaking. She steadied him without words, guiding his reload, her touch brief but grounding. When he looked at her, his eyes searched for something, orders, hope, maybe even humanity. All she gave him was silence. The firefight dragged into eternity. Each minute carved another wound into the squad. One by one, their voices faded, swallowed by screams, then silence. The lieutenant took a round to the shoulder, collapsing against stone. Blood poured down his arm, his face pale with shock. Still, he barked orders, stubborn to the last. She crawled to him, tore fabric from her own sleeve, and bound the wound tight. He hissed through clenched teeth but didn't protest. His eyes met hers briefly. For once, there was no rank between them, only two survivors clinging to a crumbling edge. Then it happened. A grenade landed just feet away, rolling against stone. She had seconds. Her body moved before her mind. She grabbed the younger soldier by the collar and shoved him flat against the dirt, covering his head. The blast ripped the air apart. Stone shattered. Fire bit her back. Her ears rang with the thunder of death. When the smoke cleared, she was alive. So was the boy, but two others were not. Their bodies lay broken, shrapnel embedded deep. Silence claimed them in cruel finality. Her breath came ragged, chest tight. She had saved him. Again. Why? She didn't know. Maybe because his silence was the only one that reminded her of her brother. Maybe because she was tired of being the last one alive. The enemy pressed closer, their shouts echoing off the rock. The squad was nearly gone. The lieutenant slumped against the stone, his voice weak but sharp. "You need to go." She frowned. "No. You'll stay and we'll all die here. That's not courage, that's waste." His gaze was fierce despite the pallor of his skin. "Take him." He nodded toward the younger soldier. Get him out, that's an order. The younger soldier shook his head violently. I'm not leaving. The lieutenant cut him off with a roar that broke into a cough. Do you want all of this to mean nothing? Go. Her throat burned. She wanted to argue, wanted to scream, but the silence inside her held steady. Orders were orders, and sometimes the most brutal ones were the only ones worth obeying. She grabbed the boy's arm, dragging him back from the ridge as bullets whistled overhead. He struggled, resisted, shouted protests, but she did not loosen her grip. Behind them, the last of the squad fired desperately. One by one, their shots fell silent. The lieutenant's voice was the final echo, shouting into the storm of gunfire, "Hold them, hold them." Then nothing. Only silence. She pulled the boy into a narrow crevice, rocks shielding them from sight. They crouched there, breaths ragged, as the enemy swept the ridge above. Voices shouted, boots thundered. She held him still, her hand pressed against his chest, willing him into silence. He trembled, not with fear but with fury. His whisper cracked through the stillness. We left them. She closed her eyes. His words cut deeper than shrapnel. Yes, they had left them, just as she had left her brother years ago when she hadn't been there to save him. History repeating, silence echoing. Her eyes opened, cold and steady. We didn't leave them, we carry them. The boy stared at her, confusion and pain colliding in his gaze, but he said no more. Above them the enemy combed the ridge. Then slowly their footsteps retreated. They believed the squad was dead. In a way, they weren't wrong. When the valley fell quiet again, she finally exhaled. Her body sagged against stone. The boy leaned beside her, silent tears streaking his dirt-stained face. They were alive, but alive no longer felt like victory. Alive felt like punishment. The sun climbed higher, burning the night away. Shadows shortened. The valley looked different in daylight, less like a battlefield, more like an ancient graveyard where the living had no right to linger. She rose stiffly, pulling the boy with her. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes hollow. There was no squad anymore, no lieutenant, no orders. Just the two of them. The silence stretched long between them as they stumbled forward, deeper into the mountains. And she knew, sooner or later, that silence would demand its price again. The mountains did not forgive. By midday, the sun burned hard, stripping away every shadow that once sheltered them. The heat pressed down, cruel and merciless, baking the stone until it radiated fire beneath their boots. The boy staggered, sweat streaming, his lips cracked from thirst. She walked ahead, silent, her rifle slung across her chest, eyes constantly sweeping the ridges for movement. Every sound made her tense, the scrape of loose gravel, the whisper of wind slipping through jagged cliffs, even the hollow beat of her own heart. Out here, silence wasn't peace, it was a predator. They hadn't spoken in hours. The boy's eyes were swollen from tears, but he didn't cry anymore. His silence matched hers now, though his felt heavy with anger. Hers was older, colder, a silence that had grown roots in her long before this mission. Finally, he broke it. Why didn't you stay? She didn't look back, because staying would have killed us both. His voice cracked, and leaving didn't. The question cut deep. She didn't answer, couldn't. The silence filled the space instead, a bitter, invisible fog wrapping around them. They moved through a narrow pass, cliffs looming on either side. The rocks here were carved by centuries of wind, sharp-edged and jagged like broken teeth. A place that swallowed sound and gave nothing back. Halfway through, the boy stopped. His shadow fell long behind him, trembling in the heat. I don't care what he ordered. I should have stayed. I should have. She turned sharply. And then what? You think your rifle would have changed anything? Her voice cracked like dry stone. He flinched but didn't look away. At least I wouldn't feel like this. Her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him the truth, that the feeling never left, that it lived inside you, gnawed at you, whispered to you in the dark, but the words lodged in her throat. Instead, she just said, "Keep moving." He stared at her, jaw clenched, but obeyed. His boots scraped the rock as he followed, each step reluctant. The silence returned, heavier than before. That night they found shelter beneath an overhang of stone, a shallow cave that reeked faintly of smoke from some long-abandoned fire. She built no fire of her own. Light was a death sentence here. Instead, they sat in the dark, backs against stone, sharing the last of their water in silence. The boy's voice came soft, almost broken. What was his name? She blinked. Whose? The one you lost, the one you keep seeing when you look at me. Her breath caught. She hadn't told him. She hadn't told anyone, but her silence had betrayed her long ago. Daniel, she whispered. The name felt foreign on her tongue, as though it belonged to another life. My brother. The boy shifted closer, his eyes glinting in the faint moonlight that leaked into the cave. What happened to him? She stared into the dark, listening to the wind scrape the cliffs outside. She wanted to say nothing, to let the silence hold the story forever, but something inside her cracked open. He enlisted before me, thought he could make a difference. He was reckless, brave in ways that didn't wait for orders. His unit went dark during a patrol. They never came back. Her voice thinned. Only their weapons were found, scattered, as if the mountain swallowed them. The boy was quiet for a long time. Then softly, "And you think it was your fault?" Her jaw tightened. "I wasn't there." "That's not fault." Her laugh was bitter, hollow. "Tell that to the silence." The boy leaned his head back against the stone, eyes closing. His voice came tired, almost pleading. "Then don't let it swallow me too." The words struck harder than any bullet. She turned away, hiding her face in shadow. Her silence had always been armor, but now it felt like a blade pointed inward. The next morning they moved again. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, thirst burning their throats. Every step was survival. And yet something inside her shifted. She noticed the way the boy's stride was slowing, his shoulders slumping. She found herself matching his pace instead of forcing him to keep hers. She rationed the last fragments of dried rations to him, keeping none for herself. When he stumbled, she steadied him with a hand. Each gesture was small, but they were cracks in her silence. As they climbed a steep incline, the boy asked suddenly, "Why do you never pray?" She frowned. "Why do you?" He hesitated. "Because it feels like someone's listening, even if no one is." Her voice was quiet. "I stopped believing in listeners a long time ago." After Daniel. Her silence was answer enough. They crested the ridge. Below, the valley stretched wide, a river of stone and dust, and in the distance smoke, rising thin against the sky. The boy's eyes widened. "Is it them?" She studied it through her scope. Not enemy. The smoke was too faint, too thin, like a small fire, a camp. Maybe locals, maybe shepherds, maybe danger. But maybe hope. Her heart quickened. The boy whispered, "Do we go?" Her silence lasted a long time. The mountain wind howled around them, demanding an answer. Finally she lowered the scope. "We go." The descent was brutal. Loose rocks slid beneath their boots, threatening to send them tumbling. Dust choked their throats. The sun dipped low, casting the valley in molten gold. By the time they reached the floor, night was falling. The smoke was closer now, curling upward from behind a cluster of boulders. The boy's hand brushed his rifle nervously. She raised hers first, finger brushing the trigger. Every step closer tightened the knot in her chest. And then voices. Not enemy, not soldiers, children. Her stomach dropped. She crept closer, peering around the rock. A small fire burned in a hollow. Around it, a family, 3 children, a woman, and old man sat huddled. Their clothes were ragged, their faces drawn with hunger, but their eyes were not hostile, only weary. The boy exhaled in relief. "They're not fighters." But her silence lingered, because she knew better than to trust first impressions. In war, even kindness could be bait. The woman looked up, her eyes met theirs. For a long moment no one moved. Then she raised her hand, slow, cautious, and beckoned. The boy looked at her, pleading silently. Her grip on the rifle tightened. Her silence screamed at her. This could be a trap. This could be the end. And yet, something in the woman's gaze broke through. It wasn't malice. It was the same look she had seen in the boy's eyes. Loss, desperation, the hollow ache of survival. She lowered the rifle. The boy nearly collapsed with relief as they stepped into the hollow. The family shifted, wary but not hostile. The old man offered a skin of water. The woman tore a flatbread in half, pressing it into the boy's trembling hands. He devoured it with tears in his eyes. She sat in silence, watching him. For the first time in days, his shoulders eased, his breathing steadied. And in that moment, she felt the weight of her silence again, heavier than ever. Because survival wasn't just about bullets and rations. It was about connection, and she had been starving him of that as much as food. The woman's voice broke the quiet, rough, accented, but clear enough. "You run from fighting." She nodded once. The woman studied her, eyes sharp but not unkind. Then softly, "We all run. Some run outside, some run inside." Her gaze lingered on her face as if she could see every ghost hiding there. The words hit like stone. Run inside, that was her, always her. The boy looked at her then, not with anger, not with blame, but with something worse, hope. She looked away. The silence roared inside her. But she knew, soon she would have to break it. The fire burned low in the hollow, its smoke thin and fragile against the night. The children had curled into sleep, their faces soft beneath layers of dust. The old man snored faintly, head bowed against the stone. Only the woman remained awake, her eyes fixed on the flames, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The boy lay stretched out on the ground, belly finally filled, his breathing even. For the first time in days, he looked like what he truly was, just a child trying to survive a war built by men older than him. She sat in the shadows, back against the rock, rifle across her knees. Sleep tempted her, heavy and relentless, but she resisted. Sleep was luxury. Sleep was surrender. Her eyes scanned the dark valley beyond. The silence out there wasn't empty, it was watchful. She had learned long ago that silence had many faces, some gentle, some cruel. Tonight was cruel. The woman's voice came soft, breaking the quiet. "You are soldier." It wasn't a question. She didn't answer. The woman glanced at her, then back to the fire. "I saw your eyes before you lowered your weapon, eyes of someone who has carried death." Her jaw clenched, she didn't deny it. The woman's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "Then you know it follows you, even when you walk away." For a moment the crackle of the fire was the only sound. Then, softly, she said the words she hadn't spoken in years. "It never lets you go." The woman's gaze lingered, heavy with understanding. "But you still carry him." She stiffened. "Who?" "The one who is gone. I see it in you." The silence pressed down, suffocating. She looked away, unwilling to let the firelight expose what she'd buried. The woman didn't push further. She only whispered, "Sometimes carrying them is all we can do." The words echoed in her chest like a drumbeat. Hours later, she woke to the boy shaking her shoulder. His face was pale, his eyes wide with alarm. "Voices," he whispered. She sat up instantly, rifle raised. The fire had burned to embers, leaving the hollow shrouded in darkness. She strained her ears. At first only wind, then, yes, voices, low, sharp, foreign, moving closer. "Enemy patrol." The old man stirred, coughing softly. The woman pressed a hand over his mouth, eyes wide with fear. The children whimpered, sensing the danger, but made no sound. She pressed her back to the rock, rifle tight against her shoulder. Her pulse thundered. The voices drew nearer, boots crunching against gravel. Light flared briefly, a flashlight beam slicing the dark. The boy's breath came quick, shallow. She placed her hand over his chest, steadying him as she had before. His heartbeat pounded against her palm. The patrol stopped just beyond the hollow. Their voices grew louder, arguing over something unseen. The flashlight swept across the rocks, missing the hollow by inches. Every muscle in her body screamed to act, to fire first, to silence them before they could discover the family. But pulling the trigger meant giving away their position. And then all of them, woman, children, boy, would die. So she stayed still, silent. The silence pressed harder than ever, crushing her lungs. Finally, the voices drifted away, fading into the valley. The crunch of boots grew softer, then gone. The boy collapsed against the ground with a shuddering breath. The children began to cry quietly, muffled in the woman's arms. She lowered her rifle slowly, her hands trembling. Silence had saved them this time, but it would not save them forever. By morning, the family prepared to move. The woman packed what little they had into a worn cloth bundle, the old man leaning heavily on a stick. The boy frowned. "Where are they going?" She answered flatly, "Away from us." It was true. They were safer alone than tied to fugitives. She watched the woman adjust the scarf around her daughter's head, watched the boy cling to the bread crust the woman had given him. The woman met her gaze one last time. Something unspoken passed between them. Not trust, not friendship, something older, a recognition of burdens neither could set down. Then the family disappeared into the valley, swallowed by distance. The boy's voice cracked. "We should have gone with them." She shook her head. "We'd only bring death to their door." His shoulders slumped. He didn't argue. They traveled in silence for days, moving by night, hiding by day. Hunger returned, sharp and merciless. The boy grew weaker, his steps faltering more often. She carried him when he stumbled, though her own strength was draining fast. One evening, as they crouched in the shadow of a ruined watchtower, the boy spoke again. "Why do you keep saving me?" She blinked. "Because you're alive." "That's not an answer." Her jaw tightened. She wanted to say nothing, to let silence guard the truth, but his eyes held her, demanding more. Finally she whispered, "Because I couldn't save him." The boy's face softened. He didn't ask who, he already knew. She looked away, throat burning. The silence inside her cracked wider. The next night they heard it, engines. Distant at first, then louder, grinding up the valley road. She pulled the boy into cover, heart hammering. Through her scope she saw them. Enemy trucks, mounted guns, dozens of soldiers, not a patrol this time, an entire convoy. And in the middle of it, bound and blindfolded in the back of one truck. Her breath caught. It was the woman, the mother from the hollow. Her stomach twisted. The family hadn't escaped, they'd been caught. The boy saw too. His voice was sharp with panic. "We have to do something." She lowered the rifle, silence swallowing her. There were too many, an entire convoy. Attacking meant suicide. But leaving them. Her hands trembled on the rifle. Her mind screamed with conflict. Every lesson she'd learned said to walk away, to survive, to keep silence. But her heart burned. The boy whispered fiercely, "If you walk away, you'll never stop carrying them too." The words hit like thunder. Daniel, the squad, the lieutenant, every face she carried in silence. Was she about to add one more? Her finger brushed the trigger. The convoy rumbled closer, dust rising into the night sky. The silence inside her was no longer armor. It was a prison. And for the first time, she wanted out. The convoy moved like a serpent through the valley, its engines growling against the mountainside. Dust spiraled into the night, glowing faint beneath a thin moon. Trucks rumbled in staggered formation, soldiers perched on the edges with rifles ready. Their voices carried sharp, careless laughter, the kind only men drunk on power knew. Through her scope she tracked each vehicle. One truck in the center pulled her breath short. The woman sat blindfolded, wrists bound, her children huddled beside her, faces streaked with tears. The old man leaned against the side rail, too frail to resist. Her heart hammered like a drum. The boy crouched beside her, his eyes wide with terror and expectation. "They'll kill them," he whispered. She swallowed hard, or worse. Her rifle steadied, but her mind shook. Too many targets, too much steel and firepower. A sniper's weapon was meant for silence, precision, not to stop an army. But silence had chained her long enough. The convoy slowed near the broken bridge at the river's edge. Soldiers dismounted, some lighting cigarettes, others stretching sore muscles. A few wandered to the water, laughing. Her scope lingered on one face after another, then back to the family. She saw the woman whispering into her daughter's hair, soothing her despite her own terror. That strength, that defiance, it was the same thing she had once carried before grief hollowed her out. The boy's voice came sharp, "Do something." Her throat tightened. "Daniel," she thought, "if you were here, you tell me this is madness." But Daniel was gone. Only his ghost remained, heavy in her silence. The boy gripped her sleeve. "Please." She lowered the scope, closed her eyes. For a long breath she listened to the hum of engines, the careless laughter of soldiers, the rush of the river below. Then she heard something deeper, her own heartbeat steady, unrelenting, a rhythm she thought she'd lost. When she opened her eyes, the silence inside had shifted. No longer chains, now it was resolve. She whispered to the boy, "When I fire, run, don't look back." His face froze in shock. "What about you?" Her voice was calm, final. "Keep running, live. That's how you save me." He shook his head violently. "No, I won't leave you." She placed her hand on his cheek, steady, firm. "You will, because I carried one boy too long in silence. I won't carry two." Tears burned his eyes, but he nodded. She pulled the bolt back, slid a round into place. The metallic click was soft, decisive. Through the scope she found her mark. The convoy commander, standing tall, barking orders, arrogance painted across his face. Her breath slowed. One shot. The rifle cracked. The commander dropped like a felled tree, chest blooming red. Chaos erupted instantly. Soldiers shouted, scrambling for cover. Rifles rose, beams of light cut through the dark. She was already moving, sliding down the rocks to a secondary position. Her hands worked without thought, reload, aim, fire. Another soldier fell, then another, each shot precise, merciless. The boy darted into the shadows just as she told him. Her heart clenched as his small figure vanished, but she forced her focus back to the scope. The convoy was in disarray, men firing blindly into the hills, bullets sparking against stone. She shifted position again, crawling low, breath burning in her chest. Her rifle spoke in thunderclaps, each round an echo of the silence she'd held for years. She was no longer hidden in shadows. She was the shadow. Soldiers scrambled to mount the heavy gun on one of the trucks. She saw it turning, barrel swinging toward the rocks where she hid. No time. She fired once, twice. The gunner's body jerked, then slumped, the weapon stilled. But muzzle flashes sparked back instantly. Bullets tore into the ground around her, rocks splintering. She rolled, dirt spraying, ears ringing. Pain lanced her shoulder, grazed. Nothing fatal, not yet. Her scope found the ropes binding the family. She exhaled. One shot. The rope snapped. The woman ripped the blindfold free, eyes blazing even in terror. The children screamed, the old man clutching them tight. Soldiers lunged to seize them back. Her finger pulled again. A soldier dropped beside the truck. Another staggered back, clutching his throat. "Run!" she roared, her voice tearing out of her for the first time in years. The woman didn't hesitate. She grabbed her children and leapt from the truck, dragging them toward the riverbank. The old man stumbled after. Gunfire chased them, but she laid down cover, every shot clearing their path. For a fleeting moment, she saw hope. Then the trucks roared alive again. Engines revved, tires screeched. Soldiers regrouped with brutal efficiency. They wouldn't let the family escape. And they wouldn't let her live. She sprinted from her perch, rifle slung, pulling the pistol from her thigh holster. Shadows and light blurred as she closed distance with the convoy. Bullets whined past. She fired back in rhythm, each shot finding flesh. She moved like she had in training, calculated, unstoppable. But numbers overwhelmed. For every one she dropped, 3 more rose. The boy's voice echoed in her head. If you walk away, you'll never stop carrying them too. No walking away now. She reached the lead truck, slammed against its tire for cover. Her chest heaved, blood dripping warm down her arm. Through the smoke, she saw the woman shoving her children into the river's edge, urging them to swim. The old man clutched the boy's hand. They were fleeing. They had a chance. That was enough. A grenade clinked nearby. She dove, the explosion tearing earth and steel apart. Her ears roared, body thrown against the ground. Pain seared her ribs. She forced herself up, coughing, vision blurred. Soldiers advanced, rifles raised. Her pistol clicked empty. She dropped it, hands fumbling for her knife. But before she could rise, a figure loomed over her, rifle aimed at her chest. Time slowed. She saw Daniel's face, saw the boy, saw the woman's, saw every ghost she carried. And she smiled, small, tired, unbroken. The rifle fired. Silence. But not the silence of emptiness. This one was different, softer. When the smoke cleared, the family had vanished into the river's mist. The boy was gone, carried toward freedom. Her body lay still among the wreckage, rifle at her side. Eyes closed, face calm as though finally at rest. The soldiers searched, cursed, raged, but she had taken enough of them to break their hunt. The convoy limped away, dragging its wounded into the night. The valley grew quiet again. Only the river moved, carrying echoes downstream. Days later, whispers spread among the villages of a lone woman who had shattered a convoy, who had bought a family's freedom with her last breath. Some called her a ghost, others a martyr. To the boy, she was something else entirely. He carried her story in his silence, not as a chain, but as a fire. Because her love, unspoken yet unbreakable, had echoed longer than any honor given.